Well, I have some comment. Yeah, I just want to comment on the therapist stance. First, thank you. It's beautiful work. And, I just loved, particularly in the beginning, how your stance was so authentic and kind of conversational.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't techniquey. And I just think that's so important. Like I think back, and owning your agenda, but then saying it doesn't have to be his agenda, and then role modeling that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think back with horror, with like some borderline patients who would say, "Well, you look furious," and I'd say, "No, no, no, I'm not furious," and I would completely deny it. And then what am I role modeling? So I just love that stance. I learned a lot. I love the part about if the person's too defensive, you're just being different, which I would call show, not tell.
Yep.
You're showing something, but you're not, it's kind of implicit defense work. You're just showing it without telling because they're too defensive and then he's going to argue or whatever. So just showing until, there was a better alliance,
Yep.
right? It's like improv. You just go with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then you kind of invite in a more subtle way, but not in a formulaic, how do you feel, or do you notice you're doing this? It'd
Yep.
be too premature, and you'd risk that alliance.
Yep.
So anyway, just some comments about like stance I thought was really just so important to illustrate, so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I feel very sort of understood and seen. I really appreciate that, Steve. Thank you. Yes, yes. Therapeutic stands. Bart, go ahead.
Yes, I also have a question about that therapeutic stance. Were you like afraid during the breakthrough that you were with boosting your voice that you might still be pushing a bit also? Was it some concern of you, or didn't
Right.
you?
Right. That's a great question. Thank you for that. The answer is no. The answer is no. And the reason was that the alliances, both of them, were so palpable. Like at this point, I had done so much work on differentiating myself. I knew that he was clear that we're not here for me. And that even though I might have a strong opinion or whatever, that it's not about my agenda. Like it was just crystal clear to me that he knew that I'm not this controlling figure. And so at that point, I can more confidently talk about, sure, I think it would be better for you to do this or do that, or why do that to yourself? Don't do this to yourself. I could do that without risking all the potential downsides that, like if you look at the first thing I showed you, that would have been a disaster. That would have just been filtered through the filter of here's one more demanding, controlling figure in my life that I need to oppose, right?
Yes, yes.
But because that had been neutralized, it was really an abeyance, and the alliance and the rapport, it was just so strong. I knew that I can engage in ramping up with more heavy pressure and challenge. Great question. Thank you, Bart.
Yes, thank you. It's also a beautiful example of, allowing yourself to wanting to ramp up, and that also your will was allowed to be present when he knew it isn't about your will, but still it is allowed to be there. Like that's also inspiring for me.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, at that point, my will was to amplify his will. It wasn't about like a battle of wills, but it was a reflection of and an amplification of his will. It's really boosting the UTA at that point. It's really not at all about me or what I want, but that's how the function was with that piece at the end. Yeah. So I talk about tier 1 and tier 2. So in tier 1, there's this groundwork. The legwork is being done around sorting through the projective processes, trying to get some sort of conscious therapeutic alliance. Once that's all in place, then I try to go to tier 2. I say tier 2. By that I mean the real mobilization phase, which is really about mobilizing the unconscious towards breakthroughs. So the first part we saw tier 1 work, and then we saw tier 2. Okay. Anything else?
Thank you.
Yeah, you too. You too.
Yeah, I think it's so beautiful to to take part of this tier 1 work, because it's really your voice and you're so genuine when you do this. And I think it's important in the IST community in a way that we have technified the tier 1 part too much. When we learn this, it gets so much focused on skills.
Yes.
I think we should learn it in another way, but I don't really know how, but you're on the way.
Well, thank you. That certainly speaks to my heart. Well, thank you. I'm so glad it was helpful to you. And the technique is in the background. Like, I don't want the technique to become another barrier between me and the patient. It's not like I forget all my bearings, and it's not like I no longer think about what's going on psychodiagnostically. But yeah, I really try to have that operate in the background, not the foreground. So I'm so glad that makes sense to you. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm loving this discussion about the training process. I think it's just so important, that this is running in the background and we're relating to the person in front of us, not our theory. And it reminds me, Picasso said, learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. You have this in the back, and then you can kind of be yourself, and you're kind of informed by that.
Yes.
But, it's not running the show.
Oh, yeah, that's music to my ears too. I love that. Thank you, Steve. I love that. Good. All right, very good. Any final commentary? Anything that, Salman.
I wonder, Johannes, what helped you in taking that stance? So that stance that we are talking about and bringing, we talk about it, that it is something important, and we can, if we are in the client position, we don't want to be treated as a machine. But then what helped you take that stance? Or in other words, not take, maybe be that stance.
What a question. Well, I had my own therapy. I had a really good therapist. I was a basket case. I was like 24 years old or something, and it turned my life around. So a lot of my own defenses were restructured. I'm still a work in progress and all of that, but it was profoundly healing. And then after that, I've gone to various meditation retreats. Prior to the therapy, I lived at a Zen Buddhist monastery for 1.5 years, where we had these retreats where we meditated for 15 hours a day. And so I just continue that process, like sometimes when I'm driving, I feel feelings just come up and they wash over me, and I just let it happen. So the more I keep working on myself, the more I seem able to stay grounded and centered and keep the technique where it belongs and just show up as me, so that it's a real relationship. Therapy is about working out a relationship. And if the technique is getting in the way, it's not going to happen. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's my response.
Is there something that you continue doing on a kind of continuous basis to keep that quality?
Yeah, it's two things. It's the meditation, and it's the being a therapist, like hour after hour, seeing patients, having these sessions, like it grinds away at my own defenses as we go. Now, whatever portions of me are still defended, I get a lot of pressure just from doing the therapy. Like my defenses get challenged. And so I think there's a gradual, slow restructuring going on just over the years of doing this day in and day out and day in and day out.
If I may ask, is there a particular medication that you would like to share with us?
Oh, you mean meditation? Is that what you said?
Yeah, you mentioned meditation, right?
Yeah. No, right. Yeah, I just like to sense my body from the inside. And then I just it's sort of like just a mindfulness. I have an anchoring attention on my breath, but then I just pay attention to any source of discomfort or anything like that. As soon as I feel that, I hone in on that. And I just stay with that discomfort. And eventually there's usually just an outpouring of feelings. So I don't know if there's a name for that, but that's what I do. So
that's very helpful.
Oh, cool. Okay. Charlotte?
Yeah, I just want to thank you, as it was so intense and I thought you were so brave. I was thinking it takes a lot of courage, to stay in this field, or sorry, my English is not so good, but yeah, I was just thinking that as a therapist, you need to be brave and just to stay with the emotion. And yeah, there were so many fine details in what you showed us today. So I was really, I got a lot out of it. Really. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm very touched. I'm trying to let all this in. Maybe my resistance against emotional closeness is starting to really. Thank you. I am very touched. I am very touched.